So what this is, it's just a brief exercise or thought experiment, and it's in the field of philosophy, and it is regarding philosophical dualism. Philosophical dualism is a complicated way of saying basically we have a couple of different perspectives by which we can view the world, because let's be honest, it seems like there's a world of things and stuff out there that we are all perceiving, right? But at the same time, our perception indicates that it's there because it illuminates it in the theater of our mind. So where do things actually exist? Are they physically separate from us and perception allows us to get a picture of it in the mind? Or is the idea that things are physically located simply an illusion and there is some unknown cause and the only place that they actually really exist is in the mind? So that's the difference. Or do they exist in both places? Are they here and there, or only one or the other? And so this is kind of a dilemma. And you have to answer questions like this, especially when you're doing philosophy. You need a starting point. You have to have a starting point when you're doing philosophy. And has anyone heard of René Descartes? French philosopher, Meditations on First Philosophy. It's not important, but he was unable to find a starting point. So he said, I want to do philosophy and I want to begin, but how do I know where to begin? I can't even know that I myself exist. I'm just a figment of someone's imagination. How can I establish that I exist? You have to plant a flag somewhere so that you can begin to navigate from that. And he was searching for that, and he was stumped for a long time. He thought about it, he thought about it, he thought about it, when it suddenly occurred to him, wait a second. Just the fact that I'm contemplating and thinking about this, that in and of itself is proof that I exist. Ta-da! I think, therefore I am. You probably heard that expression before. That's where that comes from. He was looking for that starting point, and that is the starting point. Now, when you lay it out logically, it's actually not, I think, therefore I am. It's first I think, then I am. I think, therefore I am. That's the correct logical format, but it doesn't sound good on bumper stickers and coffee cups. So we just say, I think, therefore I am. So, if we bring that forward to today, we can have a look at philosophical dualism, which presents a similar dilemma in terms of a starting point. And so basically philosophical dualism is that idea that where do things really exist? Are they physical things that are stuff, or they only exist in the mind? And we basically have two camps in philosophy, one of two. And the first camp would be the materialists. And the materialists, their view is materialism. And materialism, very simply, is just the idea that there exists in the world physical stuff and things. They're not an illusion, they don't come and go, they're actually there. And they have properties, we can describe them, we can explain what they look like, and we can measure them in different ways and extrapolate from them so that we can describe things. Those are the materialists. Now, I don't want to presume too much about you, but I would venture to guess that you are probably all materialists. So, in other words, in 8th or 9th grade, you had a science class, and in the science class, the instructor taught you that everything in the world, everything in the universe, everything, was all comprised of this substance that could neither be created nor destroyed, and that it came, when I was a young man, in 3 different forms. It could only change forms. Today I think there are 4 and some subcategories. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Plasma, like fire?
That'd be the 4th one, yes. What's the substance that can't be created nor destroyed that you learned about?
Matter.
Matter, yeah, very good. Matter. And the 3 forms when I was in school was solid, liquid, gas, and we've added plasma to that. And someone schooled me yesterday who knew a lot more about it than I did, that there were some subcategories in there, but we don't have to worry about that. I'm a philosopher, not a scientist. So, did you all accept that? Again, I don't want to presume too much, but did anyone reject that? Did you stand up and say, no, I don't think that's correct? You're wrong about that. I'm going to insist on a new theory. It's okay, I accepted it too. Right? So safe to say you were all materialists. Now, the alternative to that view would be the idealists. And their philosophical viewpoint is idealism. And idealism says the opposite. Idealism says, no, you are wrong. There is no physical stuff that exists separately and apart from us. Everything is an illusion. How many of you have seen the movie The Matrix? Yeah, a bunch of you. Cool movie. You should watch it. You'll have a real good understanding of this dilemma. Or at least there's really good kung fu in it. I like that part too. Well worth the watch. Great movie. And basically in the movie, these people were being held prisoner by this, sorry, I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but they were being held captive by this supercomputer, this evil computer that was basically using them as a battery source. And the computer kept them alive in these pods where they were filled up with goop and they were sort of in this suspended whatever. And in the back of their heads, they were plugged into the supercomputer that was generating what it called the Matrix, which was a fake world and universe. So basically in the beginning, rather quickly, the star of the movie, Keanu Reeves, figures out that nothing is actually real. It's all an illusion. That's like idealism. It's not until in the real, actual world, where they unplug him from the machine, that he disappears out of this world and then into his actual, real, physical, corporeal body. So that movie kind of used that distinction and did a really nice job of it to turn it into a terrific movie. But that's the difference, material versus ideas, which is it. Now, I want to walk us through a little experiment, a thought experiment, just so that I can show you something here about this. So let's see if I have, this will be satisfactory. We'll use this handbag. So you all agree this is a material, physical object? Okay. So I want to make a list. It won't be a complete and thorough list, but I want to list out some of the properties of this object. In other words, when I say properties of this object, what I mean is, how might you describe it if you had to send somebody over to get it? In what ways would you describe the properties of it to them so they can come retrieve it? Or if you were to take it in the laboratory so that you could measure different things about it, what would you measure about it? Those would also be properties. So what are some of the properties of that object?
Medium size.
Size? Could I say dimension? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Dimension. Appears to have dimensions.
Color,
Color. Very good.
material,
Yeah, the materials. Some type of canvas in this case. We'll note that.
weight,
Weight. What else?
temperature,
Location.
Could be secondary. Location. Location might be a secondary property of it. I'm not sure if that's a property of the object or the property of the environment that it's in. So it
state
might-
of matter.
Sorry?
I said state of matter.
Well, that's what we're looking for. One more. Let's see if we get one more. We got dimension, color, material, weight. What else? You know what? Why don't we just separate shape from dimension? I think there's quite a bit of overlap between those two, but I'd like to try to give us 5. So obviously, that's not an extensive list of every property of that object, but would we all at least agree on these 5? It has shape, dimensions to it, color, material, and weight. Anyone want to take those off or disagree with them? Just speak now. So here's what I will tell you. Out of those 5 properties, you are wrong about 2 of them. 100% wrong. And this is not a parlor trick or a play on words where it was a riddle and then, oh, he got us on that one. I genuinely mean to say that you are 100% wrong about 2 of those, and I'm going to convince you that you are, and you're going to accept it. By the time you leave here, you will believe, as I do, you will actually know that 2 of those are absolutely wrong, and I'll stake my career on it. Would you like to guess the first one?
Color.
Why do you think color?
The way you see things aren't like actually as they are.
It's perspective based.
Oh, you're on the right track. Yes, you are correct. Color, that's correct. Does not belong on the list. Let me take where you got us started and I'll elaborate a bit. Fast forward from 8th or 9th grade where you learned about this thing called matter to maybe 10th or 11th grade biology and the human eye. So here we are, the eye. And in this case, the eye is looking at the object that we were just describing and listing the properties of. And so how is it perceived by the human eye? Well, waves of light come in and hit this object and bounce off of it in every direction. And the wavelengths of light that bounce off of it, when they bounce off of it, they, according to the nature of the object, will reflect in certain wavelengths. So this object reflects light off of it in wavelengths that when picked up by the human eye and transduced down the optic nerve and illuminated in the theater of the mind will make this object show up or appear as round. If the nature of it was such that it reflected the light waves at a different wavelength, in that case, we might perceive this as red or yellow or green or some different color. What I'm saying to you is that it is the human brain that translates the wavelengths of light into color. Therefore, color does not exist here. Color only exists here. The world is actually grayscale, if you want to know the truth. Human beings and most animals see the world in color. Now, I know that that's not accurate, but I happen to think it's a little better. I prefer the world in color. I like it just the way it is. Why have we come to see it in color instead of grayscale? Probably some necessary component of our development through evolutionary history. Perhaps the ability to identify ripe fruit or to avoid dangerous predators, even in, for reproductive purposes and finding a mate and all kinds of things. We have a long evolutionary biological history, and so that's probably why we have come to see colors. Some people don't. Some people are colorblind, partially or entirely, and we look at that as a defect, right? And they've got a problem that's a little bit colorblind. Actually, those people are seeing the world correctly, in part or in whole. But I like it better in color, so I will take it this way. So, have I convinced you that color does not belong on the list? Any objections to that? If you do object, then let me ask you or challenge you to do this. Take this object into a laboratory and separate all the pieces. So I want you to get the metal off of it and take the canvas apart so you have the strands of thread, whatever else that they put in there to make the whole thing work and to lay it out and stitch it together, all separate pieces. And I just want the brownness out of that. Can you separate just the brownness and show it to me? In another class, someone pointed out, well, I could get the brown dye, that's the brownness, but I don't want the dye. I just want the brownness out of the dye. No, you can't do that. Right, because it's not in the dye. It's up here. That's where colors exist. They don't exist in the object. So, we've taken color off the list successfully. What's the other one that doesn't belong on the list?
Maybe dimensions?
Maybe.
Shape.
Tell me when. Oh, you meant this way. Yeah. Weight also does not belong on the list. Why?
Chain. It has things in it. That changes the weight.
Is based on.
We're all on the right track. Color and weight are not properties of objects. They are phenomena. It means we don't really understand quite where they come from, and it's not clear how we conjure them through perception. With weight, weight is nothing but really, we're talking about gravitational force. There's no such thing as weight. If I called up my friend Mr. Musk and said, hey, can I borrow a rocket to get into deep space? I'm trying to do this thought experiment with the class. Of course, he'd be like, yeah, sure, right away, let me send you one. And we took this object and we put it on that rocket with a feather and a tractor trailer loaded with steel beams, and we got into deep space and we opened the cargo door and pushed them out. Which one would fall faster? And the answer is none of them.
What about volume?
I can't speak to that relationship. I keep it nice and simple for our thought experiment, but I see where you're going. Mass also could become a different issue, but I can't speak to those. So I'm going to keep it in layman's terms so that we can go through this experiment. It'll come together in a second, though, you'll see. If I push them out the cargo door in space, they would all just kind of hover there because there's no such thing as weight. There's only gravitational attraction. Okay? So why do we come up with it? Well, it's just a scale, no pun intended, but it makes it easier for us to speak about because let's face it, if I came in from my summer break and I said, well, I want you to know that at the end of the summer break, I had adjusted my approximate body mass so that the attraction between that and the object beneath it, which is forcing upon it, that's too much. It's just easier to come in and say, I dropped about 5 pounds over the summer, right? So that's why we use the expression of weight. But weight is actually not a property itself of the object. It's a human scale, again, that we have put on there so that we can, and it has a very useful purpose, by the way. Right? Just because these things are not technically properties of the object, that they are phenomena, when we can name the properties or supposed properties of matter, it has a practical application. Planes fly, laptops work, cell phones work, right? So even though we may be mistaken about some of these things, they do have a very practical application. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, what's the point of eliminating these things off of the list? Which, by the way, have I successfully taken both of them off the list now? Okay, good. Keep my job for another semester. Now look, I can't prove to you that there's no such thing as dimension, for example, or if we had, say, solidity up here, I can't show you that I can pass through it. I'm working on it. Maybe the chancellor's award that year for sure, huh? Not there yet, though. Yeah, I can't demonstrate that those aren't real either. But the point is this. What looked like probably to most of you the most two obvious properties, the ones that you can see and the ones that you're totally familiar with, color and weight, seemed like the two most obvious properties. And I just took them off the list, and you all agree with me that they're not properties now. So, if you were wrong about those two things, isn't it at least worth considering that you might be wrong about the other properties? And that's the point of that experiment. So, again, I can't prove to you that these other properties don't exist, though I will work on it. It is worth considering, gee, I was wrong about what seems so obvious. Maybe I'm wrong about those too. I'm not sure. Now, there's another wrinkle to this, and that is when you were in 8th or 9th grade and you learned about this peculiar thing called matter and its supposed properties and how it behaved, none of you have ever actually seen an isolated particle of this substratum of matter, have you? They didn't show you one, you couldn't see one, they just told you it was there, that it literally comprised everything in the whole universe. But you've never seen one isolated. Have you ever seen a picture of one, isolated particle of matter? Never heard a third-hand account? Somebody said, oh, I went to this really cool laboratory that only a handful of people get to go to, and I saw an isolated particle of matter? Nope. So somebody taught you this in middle school and told you it was the basis of everything that exists in the world, and you accepted it whole cloth without questioning it. And it's been the basis of your metaphysical view ever since. Is that right? Don't feel bad, I did the same thing. At least you're learning the nuances of it and the problems with it a lot sooner than I did. Right? I was much later in life than you were by the time I figured any of this out, or was taught about this, I should say. So there's that. Now, the last interesting point here might be, well, what is with this idealism then? If you seem to be trying to debunk or dethrone this notion of materialism and the properties of matter, pointed out a number of things that no one's ever identified as substratum of matter. What would that be anyway? Maybe I imagine what it might look like. So there it is, and it's got the mysterious, there's the particle of matter. It's the substratum, the building block of all things in the universe. Right. Laying a finger aside of his nose, with the wink of an eye up the chimney he rose. Idealism. Let's talk about that for a minute. Sounds more complicated, like, oh, it's getting trippy now, we're into idealism. Not at all. It's actually simpler. Idealism is simpler. And I'm going to explain to you the philosophy of a man named George Berkeley. It's a very famous university in California, well known. It's named after him. I'm not sure why everybody who goes there pronounces it the wrong way. But when your highfalutin friends come back from California next summer to brag up that they go to UC Berkeley, you can point out to them that they're actually pronouncing the name wrong. So it's Barkley. Barkley is how it's pronounced. Barkley, yes. It looks like Berkeley with the E, so I get it. It's a little different in California, so forgive them. But it's pronounced Barkley. No relation to Charles at all. I don't even think George played basketball. It was like the 1600s. So probably not. But Berkeley was a committed idealist. And he thought all this talk of material and materialism was a waste of time. And so they said, all right, well, if you reject materialism, then what is your metaphysical view of the world if it's not matter and stuff and properties? And Berkeley said it's simple. Only two things exist. Only two things really actually exist. And that would be spirits and ideas. Spirits, that just means us, our essence. Those of you who are religious know exactly what I'm talking about. The invisible carbon copy of the self that parts from the body upon death and goes to a different dimension or somewhere else, depending on the religion. Your essence, I guess. And then the ideas that those spirits are having. So even though there's not a physical reality of stuff, Berkeley believed that the ideas of it, those were real. I'm having an idea of a chair and a canvas handbag, and being able to occupy a very handsome body. I don't know about that last one. Those are ideas, and so those were still real even though they weren't physical things. And he said, that's all that's real, right there, spirits and ideas. And they said, all right, smart guy, then explain to us in a way that we can understand your metaphysical view based on just those two things, if that's all that exists. And he said, no problem. Here's what it looks like. You have the main spirit, which would be God. All of the philosophers were religious, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. It's really not until you get into the 20th century that you start to see the atheist movement emerge from the philosophers, but they were almost exclusively and entirely all religious, 16 and 1700s. Berkeley was no exception. So here's the main spirit, God. And we are just kind of little carbon copies of God, somewhere in his orbit, hovering over Lake Huron or another dimension perhaps, he didn't really specify. But we are little carbon copies of God, made in his image as the reference goes. And what's happening is that God is sharing ideas with us simultaneously, so that we are all having the same experience of being in a universe, on a planet, in a country, on a continent, in a classroom, in the south of Fort Worth. Basically, for Berkeley, God was the matrix, the idea generator, sort of sharing ideas with everybody at the same time simultaneously. So we don't know it. We think there's a physical world and we can navigate through it, and there are all these components and dimensions to it. However, it's actually all an illusion. Everything is just ideas that God is sharing with us. And so if you happen to be religious, you may find that idealism actually aligns a little bit more than materialism does with your worldview. So I'm not sure what happens here. It's kind of a romantic notion. I don't think it's a terrible idea. If it's true, I wouldn't be really disappointed to find that out. I mean, maybe when we die, the ideas stop, and then the pure energy just kind of gets absorbed back into the main spirit or something. I don't know. He didn't really specify that, but it's not a terrible notion if it were true. Does anybody see any problems with it as a theory? There's one little problem with it. It's worth pointing out.
It doesn't take into account objects?
It doesn't take into account what?
Objects?
Well, it doesn't have that perspective, for sure. It would just say that objects are nothing but ideas. So like when I see you, Berkeley would say, I'm looking at basically just a spirit, but all the physical components, your body, everything,
Yeah.
just those are ideas that were created by God. The real problem with it, just a little one, is that although it's a romantic notion and a neat set of ideas, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to suppose that it's true or correct. There's no evidence to suppose that that's actually the structure, metaphysically speaking, of the universe. He just kind of thought it up. And it sounds nice, looks good on paper, ta-da, but there's no reason, there's not one iota of evidence to support it actually being true. At least with materialism, you have some practical application of it, right? Like we can demonstrate that some of these so-called properties are phenomena, but you know what? As I said, planes work and cell phones work and technology works, and I do my best to be in the camp of weirdos down here, the idealists, but at the same time that I do my best to be an idealist, I also know that I have to live my life as a materialist. Because if I don't, then why would I ever get out of bed? Nothing exists. So why do anything or go anywhere or do anything? Lay in bed and shoot heroin all day or something and drool, No, I have to presume that materialism has a practical application, that if I get in my car and start it up and drive it down the road, that the rubber on the tires is going to keep me between the lanes and I can navigate through space-time to make it to what I understand to be the South Campus, and I can do my job and earn a paycheck and then drive all the way home. That's materialism. So I identify myself as an idealist and I do my best to be an idealist, but I also know that I have to live practically, so I have to use materialism as a tool, I would say.
You can still mix the two, even if you believe more in idealism or materialism.
I think so. I think it's okay to mix the two because a legitimate perspective might be, hey, I'm an idealist, so I do agree with Berkeley that perhaps only spirits and ideas are real and everything else is an illusion. But science itself, which kind of defines and deploys materialism, is just a tool. So it, too, is nothing but a set of ideas, but those ideas are structural and they do have properties, and so we can make use out of them. So I think in that way, if I didn't lose you on that, we can kind of mesh them together. I don't think it's irrational at all to kind of, borrow a little bit from each. Certainly those of you who are religious are somewhat, at least 1 foot in this camp. So, something to think about. All right. I hope I didn't destroy your worldview too much.
It's really interesting.
Find yourself laying awake in bed this week and staring at the ceiling, wondering how you're going to put it all back together. Hopefully not like in an alley covered up with newspapers, like, I don't know. But let me point one more thing out before you leave, and that is the fact that, you think about the electron microscope, like, wow, we can see all the way down to protons and neutrons and electrons. That's like 1960s technology. We're way beyond that now. We can see down to like bosons and quarks and weird things. And so now, according to quantum theory and perhaps ultimately string theory, which are just, I would say they have as much evidence as Mr. Berkeley had. This is my personal opinion. But the more we've tried to get down to see this substratum of matter, to see an individual particle, what we've learned is that it's just not there. Instead, what is there is like we have this view through these super powerful microscopes and these advanced products. And what we see is this, I believe it's superimposition, if I'm speaking to that correctly, where it's here 1 second, then it's here another, and then it's over here, and then it's here. It just depends on the perspective of the observer. And so the more we get, scientifically, the more advanced we get, it actually appears as though this is incorrect. There is no substratum of matter. That seems to be the case. What is actually going on? I don't know. Good luck. I can't tell you. But good luck putting it back together.